We're talking about pitch shots today, continuing to give you ways to improve your short game, the scoring elements, drive for show, putt, chip, and pitch for dough. I add the other two because short game is so important. But wanted to talk about the basics, and we're over here at Blythefield Country Club in our newly constructed short game area. We have two greens, one you may be able to see from behind there, and then the other one that you definitely can see from our typical behind view camera there. And we're gonna hit some chip shots, or pitch shots, excuse me, up to the green up top. We have, a range of probably like 35 to maybe 60 yards from where we are, and we're going to focus on two different targets, one that's farther down and one that's a little bit closer over here. But let's focus on the mechanics here first, and sort of where we're different than we are when we're close to the green. These shots, these pitch shots, we are using a little more body than we do when we putt or when we chip. If you remember from our chipping video, we talked about our feet being closer together, weight a little more forward, and we're really using our shoulders to control the club back and through, very similar to when we hit a putt. Not much else is moving except for our shoulders. Some people have a little bit of release of the wrist there, but the shoulders are the main anchor or controller of both those motions, okay? So when we talk about pitch shots, we see some differences from the chip shot. We see our stance is a little bit wider. We still are going to be a little more open because we don't need our full body power. We don't need the full potential here with these short shots, but we are going to have a little bit of weight shift, so we definitely don't want our feet narrow. A little wider there. So again, slightly open, okay? And the hands are naturally going to sit where they would on a full swing. Not exaggerated forward, but they still should be a little bit left of your zipper line, and that means that we're in a position to hit ball first, okay? So if we go with the far one there, I have my 60-degree wedge, take our stance, slightly open, hands a little bit in front, and we're gonna take it back and we're gonna follow through a little bit here. And if you notice, not a bad shot there, if you notice there's a lot more weight shift. And look at the golf club. The golf club head is above my hands. If you remember, we talked about chip shots. When we chip, the club head is staying below my hands, and we're not adding any wrist action or release to that shot. But on pitch shots, we want to have a little bit of that release like we would on a full shot, okay, because we are trying to get a little more power into the ball. Another thing you might have noticed there was a little bit of a weight shift where that heel came off the ground a little bit. It didn't pop all the way up like it would in a full shot, but it sort of shifted to the inner part and sort of got to the toe as I got to my finish position. And to me, that's almost like if we're skipping a rock, right, versus throwing, right? There's a difference there, okay, in how our back foot behaves. One, they're both the same. One just isn't as complete as the other is. So think about your leg action on these shots as well, okay? So let's go ahead and hit another one here. And I will use for a pitch shot 30 to 45 to 60 yards, sand wedge or my 60-degree wedge, my lob wedge there. Just depends on the shot, the green, and sort of where I want it to land. And then we're going to get into another idea for people to think about here after this shot. But once again, stance is slightly open, and we're going to have a little bit of weight shift, and we'll see kind of how we finish on this shot. So same thing, hands finished above, chest kind of turns to the target a little bit more, and we have that little bit of weight shift on the lower half. And that knee is starting to point at the target, okay? I don't like chip shots when people are pitch shots when people are falling backwards or their legs look like this, or body comes up and the club stops. We want to make sure the club flows all the way through, the club head gets somewhere above my hands, and that there's some element of weight shift on that little bit of a pitch shot, okay? Now, traditional pitch shot, what we're talking about here, 2-lever system. Shoulder to arm, one lever, arm to wrist is the other lever, and we're using that in these shots. We're not using them in our traditional chip shots. That's a 1-lever system where it's more about the shoulders and the arms, and not about the wrist as much, okay? If you're comfortable with that feeling, there is a chip shot. I call it a long chip shot. Some people will call it a pitch shot without wrist, but it's a shot I sort of learned by watching Phil Mickelson. He has what he calls a long chip shot from these distances where he emulates this chip shot feel, where he's not thinking of using a lot of wrist action and he's controlling the club head. So we're going to show you that with my sand wedge and maybe even the pitching wedge at this distance for me. Okay, but I do like this shot because it eliminates the wrist action and it gets you thinking of your arms just going back and through. And we're going to kind of finish with the club level with our hands. It won't necessarily be below like a traditional chip shot, but it won't be above like it is with our pitch shot. Okay, so let's take a look at this shot a little closer. But I like this one because it's a very reliable shot. I've been using it a little more often, especially on days when I don't want to get cute or feel like my timing is a little off with my wrist and I'm hitting some of my traditional pitch shots heavy. I'll go to a shot like this to be more consistent. So setup is very much the same. Stance will be slightly open, still have a nice, a wider base than we would with our chip shot, but not necessarily as wide as a full shot, okay? And hands are, same position. But we're gonna really not use, we're gonna try not to use any wrist in this shot as we go back and through. Okay, so the club finished very level with my hands, okay? And I didn't use a lot of body, the weight didn't come up, and we hit it pretty solid. Okay, let's go ahead and hit another one of those for you. Now, the funny thing is too, and this is where we talk about feel versus real, even with the Phil Mickelson example, when he's doing the shot, he's saying that, I don't feel like I'm using any wrist. But if you ever watch him do this, there's a little bit of wrist action there, okay? But in his mind, this is a chip, and once again, we're all different in how much wrist we use and how much wrist we don't use. Your job is to find out what you feel comfortable with, have a chip shot that you can rely on, have a pitch shot you can rely on, and then start adjusting your club to create the different distances and to find the different landing spots that are necessary around the green. Okay, so let's try that one more time with our 54. And we're trying to hit this probably about 50 yards, 50 to 55 yards. Okay, so same thing. We won't see a lot of wrist action here. And we're kind of leaving that club flat, okay? Got a lot of power on that one. It might even went over the green. But that's a great example of adding, some less is more, right? Being a little more simple in how we kind of get through these shots can maybe help us to have better ball contact. And we all are different once we see better results. We start seeing good results and we start trusting what we're doing more, and it opens up a whole range of opportunities for you around the green, okay? So think about the traditional pitch shot, wrist in a little bit of a weight shift, okay? Or try the longer chip shot where you're taking a longer swing with your arms, not using a lot of body, right? And just trying to force that triangle back and through without your wrist. And that might help you to clip the ball and to be a little more versatile around the green.